Welcome back to another edition of Ash's Fantasy Facts here on ArizonaSports.com. Believe it or not, we are into the second half of the NFL season. Week number 9 coming up, and let's continue to try to be strong with our fantasy rosters. Now, we do have 4 teams on a bye this week. Not as bad as the previous weeks, which had 6, but there are 4 teams that are going to be missing in action this weekend. Those 4 teams are Carolina, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Minnesota. So let's keep that in mind. Some fantasy players there that we'll have to replace. Let's find those replacements, and let's start at the quarterback position as we do each and every week. A couple guys from the NFC East that I like a lot at quarterback this week, and one of those guys is going to be Tony Romo of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Romo's been pretty solid this year as a fantasy quarterback, consistent. However, he hasn't had the big game just yet. That could be coming this week as they welcome Seattle to town. I think Romo and the boys will look to bounce back after a disappointing Sunday night performance last week. And another quarterback from the NFC East is Eli Manning of the New York Giants. A little rematch of the Super Bowl a few years ago here in Phoenix, the Giants and the New England Patriots. I think the Patriots will win this game and look for the Giants to have to throw the ball to try to stay up with the New England offense. So Eli Manning, even in a loss, could be a solid starter. Now let's go to the Tread Lightly. The Tread Lightly at quarterback this week is all about the O's, as in Tim Tebow, as in, oh, you weren't very good last weekend. And I'm just not sure how good Tim Tebow is going to be. A couple weeks ago, put up solid fantasy numbers. He is a threat because he can run, but Denver's just a mess right now. So unless you're in a major bind, don't throw Tim Tebow in your starting lineup. And another O is Joe Flacco, as in, oh, you weren't very good against the Arizona Cardinals. Did get the win. Joe Flacco now has a date with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a rematch and a revenge game from Week 1. I don't like Joe Flacco's matchup against Pittsburgh at all this weekend. Let's move on to the running back position. A couple running backs I'm going to keep an eye on this week going into week number 9. And keep this in mind as I throw the first name out. We're taping the Ash's Fantasy Facts a little early this week. I like LeGarrette Blount of Tampa Bay. Now, they're coming off a bye week. The problem is LeGarrette Blount has been injured, but everything I've read says LeGarrette Blount will return after the bye week. So just keep your eye on Blount this week as far as his health status. If he's a go, he could put up some nice numbers against New Orleans. And I'm going to throw Beanie Wells in there. Beanie Wells had a pretty good game against Baltimore. Let's see if he can make it 2 in a row. If the Cardinals are ever going to win a game, it'll be this weekend against the St. Louis Rams. So Beanie Wells, pretty solid start at running back. Now I'm going to tread lightly with a couple guys that people have been relying on all season long with their fantasy rosters. One of those guys is Fred Jackson. I know, say it ain't so. Fred Jackson has been about as solid as a running back this year that we've had in fantasy football. I'm not saying to take him out of your lineup. You always put Fred Jackson in your lineup, but I don't know that he'll have a great performance against the Jets this week. It could be some of his lowest fantasy numbers of the year, so just keep that in mind. And the same goes with Matt Forte of the Chicago Bears. They're on the road taking on Philadelphia. Philly's starting to get it going a little bit, so keep your eye on that defense. And, again, throw Matt Forte out there, but be prepared to not have the usual great numbers from Mr. Forte. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. Look, I'm going to stick with this Arizona Cardinal team. I don't know why. But if Larry Fitzgerald's ever going to have a good week, I think it'll be against the St. Louis Rams. Fitz was okay last week against Baltimore. Look for them to try to get it going against the Rams, who are feeling good about themselves after a big win against New Orleans. And then I'm going to throw out both of the Philadelphia wide receivers, Jeremy Maclin and also Deshaun Jackson. Look, Philly was the dream team, and they came out looking more like a nightmare early on in the season. But they're starting to click. Keep that in mind. They are starting to get it going. So Philly guys are solid starts from here on out. Now, a couple tread lightlies at the wide receiver position. One of those tread lightlies is going to be Sidney Rice of the Seattle Seahawks. Rice actually had a very good game last weekend. I just don't know if I see it again against Dallas. Sidney Rice, a little bit inconsistent. So if you're in a bind, you could throw him out there. But if you have better options, go ahead and put those out there. And my other guy that I'm going to tread lightly this week is with Stevie Johnson of the Buffalo Bills. He's been a good player for the Bills, and the Bills like to throw the ball over the place. The only problem this weekend, Stevie Johnson has a one-way ticket to Revis Island. It's not a fun place to visit. Let's move on to the sleeper of the week, one of my favorite parts of the show, and that is where I get to pick a guy that you might not think is going to put up the great fantasy numbers, but I just have a hunch that maybe he could be your sleeper of the week. And this week's participant is Deion Branch of the New England Patriots, who actually had a solid game last week for the Patriots. And look, the receivers are going to have to step up for New England. Wes Welker was kind of held in check. By the way, does anyone remember Chad Ochocinco? Yeah, he was pretty good back in the day. What happened? Anyway, the Patriots going up against the Giants. I like Deion Branch. I think he maybe gets in the end zone. I think Tom Brady starts throwing it to him a little bit more as teams are starting to gear in on Wes Welker. And now it's time for the dud of the week, the guy that even though you think might be putting up those good numbers, this week the matchup just says it isn't going to happen. And this week's dud of the week is Ray Rice, the running back for the Baltimore Ravens. I am telling you, the Pittsburgh Steelers have had this game circled for a while. In week 1, Ray Rice went for over 100 yards and got into the end zone twice as the Steelers were blown out 35-7. This is the ultimate revenge game. They are going to do everything in their right mind, the Steelers, to stop Ray Rice and the Baltimore Ravens this weekend. Ray Rice is your dud of the week. That's it. That's how we do it. That's Ash's Fantasy Facts for week number 9. Again, remember, only 4 teams on a bye, but still make sure you don't put guys that are sitting at home watching the games like you and I. Those 4 teams are Carolina, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Minnesota. Take that in mind. Get your lineups in on time, and let's go get a win in week number 9.